Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is WireDogSec back with another video for you guys. We are going to continue on with TryHackMe. This room is the Active Directory Basics, since this room will introduce the basic concepts and functionality provided by Active Directory. As you can see here, this is part of the Complete Beginner Learning Path as well as the Offensive Security Learning Path. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. Task 1, Introduction. Microsoft's Active Directory is the backbone of the corporate world. It simplifies the management of devices and users within a corporate environment. In this room, we'll take a deep dive into the essential components of Active Directory. Room objectives. In this room, we'll learn about Active Directory and we'll become familiar with the following topics: what Active Directory is, what an Active Directory domain is, what components go into an Active Directory domain, forest and domain trust, and much more. Room prerequisites. General familiarity with Windows. Check the Windows Fundamentals module for more information. And we've read through everything here. As you can see, I've already started up the machine here. So let's continue on with task number 2, Windows domains. There's going to be a lot of reading in this room, so I may skim over some of the material, but I'll have the link to the room if you want to check it out. Picture yourself administering a small business network with only 5 computers and 5 employees. In such a tiny network, you will probably be able to configure each computer separately without a problem. You will manually log into each computer, create users for whoever will use them, and make specific configurations for each employee's account. If a user's computer stops working, you will probably go to their place and fix the computer on site. While this sounds like a very relaxed lifestyle, let's suppose your business suddenly grows and now has 157 computers and 320 different users located across 4 different offices. Would you still be able to manage each computer as a separate entity, manually configure policies for each of the users across the network, and provide on-site support for everyone? The answer is most likely no, unless you're like Superman or something. To overcome these limitations, we can use a Windows domain. Simply put, a Windows domain is a group of users and computers under the administration of a given business. The main idea behind a domain is to centralize the administration of common components of a Windows computer network in a single repository called Active Directory, or AD for short. The server that runs Active Directory services is known as a domain controller, or DC for short. And here is an image of what they are describing here. Domains, tryhackme.com. You can see they got a file server in here, database server, domain controller is here in the center, and you got the workstation and desktop, right? It says the main advantages of having a configured Windows domain are: number 1, centralized identity management. All users across the network can be configured from Active Directory with minimum effort. Managing security policies. You can configure security policies directly from Active Directory and apply them to users and computers across the network as needed. A real-world example. If this sounds a bit confusing, chances are that you have already interacted with a Windows domain at some point in your school, university, or work. That's right, most organizations are going to be running Active Directory. I don't think I've ran across an organization that wasn't running Active Directory in some aspect. In school/university networks, you will often be provided with username and password that you can use on any of the computers available on campus. Your credentials are valid for all machines because whenever you input them on a machine, it will forward the authentication process back to the Active Directory, where your credentials will be checked. Thanks to Active Directory, your credentials don't need to exist in each machine and are available throughout the network. That's right. They can also be cached on the machine as well in case you don't have network connectivity back to the domain controller. Active Directory is also the component that allows your school/university to restrict you from accessing the control panel on your school university machines. Policies will usually be deployed throughout the network so that you don't have administrative privileges over those computers. Hopefully that's configured that way. Hopefully not everybody is a local admin on those boxes. But let's go ahead and continue. Welcome to THM Inc. During this task, we'll assume the role of the new IT admin at THM Inc. As our first task, we have been asked to review the current domain thm.local and do some additional configurations. You will have administrative credentials over a pre-configured DC to do the task. Be sure to click the Start Machine button. We've already done. You can also RDP into it with those creds here. Note when connecting via RDP, use the following here. So follow these instructions here if you're going to RDP into it. obviously, I'm just going to reference the machine through this way here. Since we will be connecting to the target via RDP, this is also a good time to start the attack box unless you are using your own machine. In a Windows domain, credentials are stored in a centralized repository called Active Directory, also known as AD. So let's go ahead and type that in there. The server in charge of running the Active Directory services, remember that's the DC, which is domain controller. So if you have complete control over these domain controller, you pretty much own their entire Active Directory environment. All right, task 3, we're going to get into the bread and butter of AD looks like. The core of any Windows domain is the Active Directory Domain Service, also known as ADDS. This service acts as a catalog that holds the information of all objects that exist on your network. Amongst the many objects supported by AD, we have users, groups, machines, printers, shares, and many others. Let's look at some of them. Users are one of the most common object types in Active Directory. Users are one of the objects known as security principals, meaning that they can be authenticated by the domain and can be assigned privileges over resources like files or printers. You could say that a security principal is an object that can act upon resources in the network. Users can be used to represent two types of entities, people. Users will generally represent persons in your organization that need to access the network, like employees. Services, you can also define users to be used by services like IIS or MS SQL. Each single service requires a user to run, but service users are different from regular users as they will only have the privilege needed to run their specific servers. That's if they are configured correctly. You may come across in your career where you'll see service accounts that have been used by users in an organization, i.e., they're using that service account to conduct like everyday activities and such. Well, you probably shouldn't be doing that with a service account, right? As it says here, a service account should be used for a specific service, right? And it should be you should apply the principle of least privilege as well to all of these accounts, people and service accounts, all right? Machines. So machines are another type of object within Active Directory. For every computer that joins the Active Directory domain, a machine object will be created. Machines are also considered security principals and are assigned an account just like any regular user. This account has somewhat limited rights within the domain itself. The machine accounts themselves are local administrators on the assigned computer. They are generally not supposed to be accessed by anyone except the computer itself, but as with any other account, if you have the password, you can use it to log in. Note, machine account passwords are automatically rotated out and are generally comprised of 120 random characters. Identifying machine accounts is relatively easy. They follow a specific naming scheme. The machine account name in the domain or in the computer's name followed by $. For example, a machine named DC01 will have a machine account called DC01 $. Security groups. If you are familiar with Windows, you probably know that you can define user groups to assign access rights to files or other resources to entire groups instead of single users. This allows for better manageability as you can add users to an existing group and they will automatically inherit all of the group's privileges. Security groups are also considered security principals and therefore can have privileges over resources on the network. Groups can have both users and machines as members if needed. Groups can include other groups as well. Several groups are created by default in domain that can be used to grant specific privileges to users. As an example, here are some of the most important groups in domain. All right, so we're just going to go down the list here. You got security groups on the left, and you got the description of it on the right. All right, so domain admins, also known as DAs. Users of the group have administrative privileges over the entire domain. By default, they can administer any computer on the domain, including the DCs. Basically, this is God mode, all right, being a domain admin. Server operators, users in this group can administer domain controllers. They cannot change any administrative group's memberships. You got backup operators, account operators, domain users, domain computers, and domain controllers. You can obtain a complete list of default security groups from the Microsoft documentation, so check that out if you are interested in that. And let's talk about this next section here, Active Directory users and computers, right? Also known as ADUC. And we have that down here. You can also type it in like they're doing here to try to find it. But as you can see, what they're talking about here, all right? See under THM here, you have other specific, looks like departments and such. You got users here, right? Full of, looks like default users in here. And you got the built-in stuff here. See if there's anything in here. Yep. You got computers. So you can play around with it. You can see all the computers in the Active Directory environment here. The main controllers, you only have the DCs. There you go. And let's go ahead and continue on. We'll probably talk about some of this here shortly. To configure users, groups, or machines in Active Directory, we need to log into the domain controller and run Active Directory users computers from the start menu. So you can do it that way. You can just click down there and click on the logo there. It says this will open up a window where you can see the hierarchy of users, computers, and groups that exist in a domain. These objects are organized in organizational units, also known as OUs for short, which are container objects that allow you to classify users and machines. OUs are mainly used to define sets of users with similar policy requirements. The people in the sales department of your organization are likely to have a different set of policies applied than the people in IT. For example, keep in mind that a user can only be a part of a single OU at a time. Checking our machine, we can see that there's already an OU called THM right here with 4 child OUs for the IT, management, marketing, and sales departments. It is very typical to see the OUs mimic the business structure, as it allows for efficiently deploying baseline policies that apply to entire department. Remember that while this would be expected model most of the time, you can define OUs arbitrarily. Feel free to right-click THM OU and create a new OU under it and call it students. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, you can do it that way. You could just click in here and just click new. All right, we're going to go to new, and they want us to create a new OU. So let's go ahead and try to do that here. Organizational unit, and I'm going to call it students. Here we go. Hit OK, and now we're done. All right. If you open any of the OUs, you can see the users they contain and perform simple tasks like creating, deleting, and modifying them as needed. You can also reset passwords if needed. Pretty useful for the help desk. Right, like as I said, you can go ahead and click around in there and see users in different OUs here. So let's go ahead and just create one for myself. Let's do a new user, and let's just call it WireDogSec. WireDog, and last name. There we go. Login name, WireDogSec. Bam. There we go. Let's see if I can just leave this blank. Yep. All right. Nope. All right. Well, let's go ahead and type something in here. All right. Pretty simple to guess password here. All right. Oops. I had a typo in there. Let's try this again. Okay. All right. Now let's see if it works. Awesome. So now that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and continue on here. You probably noticed already that there are other default containers apart from the THMOU. These containers are created by default, created by Windows automatically and contain the following. You got built-in, contains default groups available to any Windows host. Computers. Any machine joining the network will be put here by default. You can move them if needed. Domain controllers, default OU that contains the DCs in your network. Users, default users and groups that apply to a domain-wide context. Manage service accounts, holds accounts used by services in your Windows domain. Security groups versus OUs. You're probably wondering why we have both groups and OUs. While both are used to classify users and computers, their purposes are entirely different. OUs are handy for applying policies to users and computers, which includes specific configurations that pertain to sets of users depending on their particular role in the enterprise. Remember, a user can only be a member of a single OU at a time, as it would make sense to apply two different sets of policies to a single user. Security groups, on the other hand, are used to grant permissions over resources. For example, you will use groups if you want to allow some users to access a shared folder or network printer. A user can be a part of many groups, which is needed to grant access to multiple resources. All right, question time. Which group normally administers all computers and resources on the domain? Well, that is the domain admins. So let's go ahead and type that in. What would be the name of the machine account associated with a machine name Tom-PC? Remember, we had to put that $ at the end for those machine accounts. So it should be looking like that. Suppose our company creates a new department for quality assurance. What type of containers should we use to group all quality assurance users so that policies can be applied consistently to them? You're going to put those into an organizational unit. So let's go ahead and type that in. There we go. So remember, when you need to um, do it this way, you got to use organizational units, and instead, if you want to do permissions, right, over resources, you're going to use security groups. All right, so task number 4, managing users in AD. Let's see what they're talking about here. Your first task as the new domain admin is to check the existing ADOUs and users as some recent changes have happened to the business. You have been given the following organizational chart and are expected to make changes to AD to match it. You got management at the top here with Daniel, marketing, sales, IT, okay? Deleting extra OUs and users. The first thing you should notice is that there's an additional department OU in your current AD configuration that doesn't appear in the chart. You've been told it was closed due to budget cuts and should be removed from the domain. If you try to right click and delete the OU, you might get the following error message. All right. Um, let's see what the one they're talking about here. It looks like research and development is the one they're talking about. So if you go ahead and try to delete it, you're going to get an error message. Yep. Okay. Let's see. By default, OUs are protected against accidental deletion. To delete the OU, you will need to enable advanced features in the view menu. So you right click on that, and actually they want us to do it this way. Okay. So let's just follow along here. Advanced features. There we go. All right. This will show you some additional containers and enable you to disable the accidental deletion protection. To do so, right click on OU and go to properties. You will find a checkbox in the object tab to disable the protection. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So now let's go to properties, and you want to go to object and uncheck mark that, hit apply, and OK. All right, be sure to uncheck the box, try deleting OU again. You'll be prompted to confirm that you want to delete the OU. As a result, any users or groups or OUs under it will be deleted. So let's go ahead and do that. Delete, hit yes, yes, and it's gone. After deleting the extra OU, you should notice that for some of the departments, the users in the AD don't match the ones in our organization chart. Create and delete users as needed to match them. All right. So let's go ahead and check this out real quick here. And let's see, management should only have Daniel in it. Okay, that looks good. IT, Philip, Mary, and Claire. Yep, looks good. Sales should have Sophie and Thomas. So they want to go in and delete these users out of here. Delete Robert, delete Christine. There we go. And then Mark should be the only one in marketing. Awesome. Looks like we're good to go there. So let's go back down here and talk about delegation. One of the nice things you can do in AD is to give specific users control or some control over OUs. This process is known as delegation and allows you to grant users specific privileges to perform an advanced task on your OUs without needing a domain administrator to step in. One of the most common uses for this is granting IT support the privileges to reset other low privileged users' accounts, passwords. According to our organizational chart, Philip is in charge of IT support, so we'd probably want to delegate the control of resetting passwords over the sales, marketing, and management OUs to him. All right, so let's see here. Sales, and they want us to right click and delegate control, like so. Step through this here. Go to add, and then we're going to add Philip, right? So let's go ahead and type his name in here, like so. Check names, got him, bam. Next, and then let's go ahead, scroll down, make sure we're doing everything correctly. Okay, we've already done this here. Yep. And then it says click next a couple times. Now, Philip should be able to reset passwords for any user in the sales department. Okay. And All right. Says, sorry, I forgot to check mark that. Reset the passwords. There we go. Now we click next through here, like so. Finish. Okay. Now let's use Philip's account to try and reset Sophie's password. Here are Philip's credentials, so you can log in via RDP. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Once you subscribe, be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, so you know every time I post a new video. As you can see here, most people that view my videos, view my channel, are not subscribed. Now, if you do subscribe, it will help me get into the YouTube algorithm so that we can continue to grow our glorious community here. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch. Have a nice day and enjoy the video. Okay, apparently I don't have to do it that way. I can just go in to the domain controller. All I did was go inside the search box here, typed in RDP, and I just connected to it that way. All right, so let's go back into the RDP session here as Philip. When connecting, RDP, yada, yada, yada. Okay. While you may be tempted to go to Active Directory using computers to try and test Philip's new powers, he really doesn't have the privileges to open it. So you'll have to use other methods to do password resets. In this case, we'll be using PowerShell to do so. So let's go ahead and get PowerShell fired up here. Okay. And let's go ahead and open this up. All right, let's just try it like this. I don't think we'll need to run as admin. So let's just do it this way. Okay. And I want us to go ahead and just type this stuff over. So let's go ahead and do that like so. Okay. Looks like it was successful. Since we wouldn't want Sophie to keep on using a password we know, we can also force a password reset at the next login with the following command. So let's go ahead and type that out as well. All right, so that's done. So let's log into Sophie's account with a new password and retrieve a flag from Sophie's desktop. So I'm going to do it the same way. All right, let me go ahead and log off here and log in as Sophie. So let's sign out here. And I'm going to do it the same way, RDP. Like that, okay. Awesome. So let's go ahead and type in their credentials here. I am logged in as Sophie via RDP. I'm not sure what happened with those credentials, but I had to go through ADUC and I just right clicked and reset the password that way. All right, anyway, so we made it to the desktop. Here's the flag here, and let's go ahead and grab this. I'm not sure if it'll let me copy and paste this over. Oh, wow, okay, it actually works. Awesome. The process of granting privileges to a user over some OU or other AD object is called delegation. All right, task number 5, managing computers in AD. And let's go ahead and see what they have for us in this area. By default, all the machines that join a domain except for the DCs will be put in the container called computers. If we check our DC, we will see that some devices are already there. And we saw that earlier. We saw a bunch of computers and stuff in there. We can see some servers, some laptops, and some PCs corresponding to the users in our network. Having all of our devices there is not the best idea, since it's very likely that you want different policies for your servers and the machines that regular users use on a daily basis. While there's no golden rule on how to organize your machines, an excellent starting point is segregating devices according to their use. In general, you'd expect to see devices divided into at least the 3 following categories. Number 1, workstations. Workstations are one of the most common devices within an Active Directory domain. Each user in the domain will likely be logging into a workstation. This is the device they will use to do their work or normal browsing activities. These devices should never have a privileged user assigned into them. That's right, and it should not be local admins on the box. All right. And they're saying like privileged user, like you don't want a domain admin logged into a regular workstation. You know why? Because what happens if that user gets owned by an attacker, right? They click on some malicious link, get malware on the box, and the attacker just goes from there. Like, oh, look here, a domain admin or another privileged account was logged into there. Let's go ahead and dump the creds from memory, and now we can access that account, that privileged account, escalated our privileges. All right, number two, servers. Servers are the second most common device within an Active Directory domain. Servers are generally used to provide services to users or other servers. Three, domain controllers. Domain controllers are the most or third most common device within an Active Directory domain. Domain controllers allow you to manage the Active Directory domain. These devices are often deemed the most sensitive devices within the network as they contain hashed passwords for all user accounts within the environment. Since we are tidying up our AD, let's create two separate OUs for workstations and servers. Domain controllers are already in an OU created by Windows. We will be creating them directly under the thm.local domain controller. In the end, you should have the following OU structure. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize that there and go ahead and right click this, new, I want new OUs. So let's go ahead and do that. Workstations. All right, that's one. And then go and get the second one here. Servers. Awesome. Now move the personal computers and laptops to the workstation OUs and the servers to the servers OU from the computers container. Doing so will allow us to configure policies for each OU later on. So let's go ahead and try that. So we're going to go to computers, and these, I'm assuming these are servers. So let's go ahead and move those over. Sure. All right. All right, servers are done. And they want us to move the laptops, the rest of the stuff over. So let's go ahead and just grab all these, and now we're done. After organizing the available computers, how many ended up in the workstations OU? Well, let's go ahead and see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bam. So it should be 8 machines in there. Oops, sorry. I can't count. 7. Uh, is it recommendable to create separate OUs for servers and workstations? Yes. All right, task number 6. We're going to talk about group policies. So far, we have organized users and computers in OUs just for the sake of it, but the main idea behind this is to be able to deploy different policies for each OU individually. That way we can push different configurations and security baselines to users depending on their department. Windows manages such policies through GPOs, also known as group policy objects. GPOs are simply a collection of settings that can be applied to OUs. GPOs can contain policies aimed at either users or computers, allowing you to set a baseline on specific machines and identities. To configure GPOs, you can use the Group Policy Management tool available from the Start menu. So let's go ahead. It's also down here, so I'm just going to click it down here. There we go. And let's see here. The first thing you will see when opening it is your complete OU hierarchy as defined before. To configure group policies, you first create a GPO under Group Policy Objects, and then link it to the OU where you want to or want the policies to apply. As an example, you can see there are some already existing GPOs in your machine. And that's right, we can see that there in the screenshot, right? You create them down here, as you can see. Let me try to move this over a little bit. All right, there we go. Now we can see them down here where it says group policy objects. All right, so I expanded that. And then up here, you can see GPOs are linked to OUs in various different places, right? So domain controllers has one, and let's see. These aren't going to have any because we just created it. Let's see here. We can see in the image above that 3 GPOs have been created. From those, the default domain policy, and it's hard to read, but it says RDP policy, are linked to the thm.local domain as a whole, and the default domain controller's policy is linked to the domain controller's OU only. Something important to have in mind is that any GPO will apply to the linked OU and any sub OUs under it. So remember that. For example, the sales OU will still be affected by the default domain policy. Let's examine the default domain policy to see what's inside a GPO. The first tab you'll see when selecting a GPO shows its scope, which is where the GPO is linked, and the AD. For the current policy, we can see that it has only been linked to the thm.local domain. And you can see that down here, links. As you can see, you can also apply security filtering to GPOs so that they are only applied to specific users or computers under an OU. By default, they will apply to the authenticated users group, which includes all users and PCs. And you can see that down here where it says authenticated users under security filtering. The settings tab includes the actual contents of the GPO and lets us know what specific configuration applies. As stated before, each GPO has configurations that apply to computers only and configurations that apply to users only. In this case, default domain policy only contains computer configurations, right? So in the settings tab up here, you can see all kinds of stuff here. As you can see, as I stated, there's not going to be any user configuration stuff here, but you can see things here inside the computer area. All right. Okay. Feel free to explore the GPO and expand on the available items using the show links on the right side of each configuration. In this case, default domain policy indicates really basic configurations that should apply to most domains, including password and account lockout policy. So go ahead and play around in here and see what you can find out. Since this GPO applies to the whole domain, any change to it would affect all computers. Let's change the minimum password length policy to require users to have at least 10 characters in their passwords. To do this, right click on the GPO and click edit. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. The default domain policy, okay, and I'm going to click edit. And let's go ahead and follow along here. This will open a new window where we can navigate and edit all the available configurations. To change the minimum password length, go to computer configurations, policies, and then let's go to Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and then password policy. All right, and then you want to change the minimum password length to, let's say 10, yeah, 10 characters. So let's go and do that. Bam, apply, okay. As you can see, plenty of policies can be established in a GPO. While explaining every single one of them would be impossible in a single room, do feel free to explore a bit, as some of the policies are straightforward. If more information on any of the policies is needed, you can double click them and read the explain tab. So if you wanted to read more about this, click the explain tab and there you go. All right. GPO distribution. GPOs are distributed to the network via a network share called sysvol, which is stored in the DC. All users in a domain should typically have access to this share over the network to sync their GPOs periodically. The sysvol share points by default to the C Windows sysvol directory on each of the DCs in our network. Once a change has been made to any GPOs, it may take up to 2 hours for computers to catch up. If you want to force any particular computer to sync its GPOs immediately, you can always run the command on the desired computer, which is gp update /force. I've used this quite a lot in my career. Creating some GPOs for THM Inc. As part of our new job, we have been tasked with implementing some GPOs to allow us to 1. Block non-IT users from accessing the control panel, 2. Make workstations and servers lock their screen automatically after 5 minutes of user inactivity to avoid people leaving their sessions exposed. Let's focus on each of those and define what policies we should enable in each GPO and where they should be linked. Restricted access to control panel. We want to restrict access to the control panel across all machines to only the users that are part of the IT department. Users of other departments shouldn't be able to change the system's preferences. Let's create a new GPO called Restrict Control Panel Access and open it for editing. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that here. All right, so let's go ahead and get this ready to go. We want to go in and create a new policy in here. So let's go ahead and do that. Click OK. There we go. Now we're going to go in and edit it. And when you go to user configuration, right? Okay, so minimize that. Policies, administrative templates. Let's go ahead and drop that down. Control panel. And then what we need is this prohibit access to control panel and PC settings. Enable it like so, and then apply. Okay. Now we're done here. And it said that we're gonna need to link these, so we can drag these to the cell, these departments here, right? As it says. So let's go ahead and drag it to marketing, sales, and management. Okay, so we're done here. Awesome. Auto lock screen GPO. For the first GPO regarding screen locking for workstations and servers, we could directly apply it over the workstation servers and among controllers, OUs we previously or created previously. While this solution would work, an alternative consists of simply applying the GPO to the root domain, as we want the GPO to affect all of the computers, since workstation servers and domain controllers OUs are all child OUs of the root domain. They will inherit its policies. Note, you might notice that if our GPO is applied to the root domain, it will also be inherited by other OUs like sales or marketing. Since those OUs contain users only, any computer configuration in our GPO will be ignored by them. Let's create a new GPO and call it auto lock screen. And let's go ahead and do that. All right. And let's go ahead, create it. So auto lock screen. There we go. Now we have to go and edit it. All right. And when you go to configure computer configuration this time, and we're going to go into policies, Windows settings, and we're going to go down to security settings and security options. Oh, sorry, local policies, and then security options. There we go. And interactive logon machine inactivity limit. So we're going to have to scroll down here a little bit. There we go. Click in here. It says we will set the inactivity limit to 5 minutes so that computers get locked automatically if any user leaves their session open. After closing the GPO editor, we will link the GPO to the root domain. So let's go ahead and do that. They have it in seconds here, so that's going to be 300 seconds. Sure. Right there, apply. Okay, now we should be done with that. Auto lock screen. Okay. Well, I've already done this, so that's already done. Once the GPOs have been applied to the correct OUs, we can log in as any users in either marketing, sales, or management for verification. For this task, let's connect via RDP using Mark's credentials. All right, so I'm just going to minimize this in case we have to jump back in and do something. So RDP again. This time I'm going to be Mark. Gosh, look at this password. All right. Okay. And so try opening the control panel. We should get a message indicating this operation is denied by the administrator. You can also wait 5 minutes to check if the screen is automatically locked. If you want, well, I'm not going to do that because we need to continue on for the sake of time. And let's go ahead and try to access the control panel. Let's just do it this way. Control panel, error message. Awesome. So it looks like it's working. And it says here that since we didn't apply the control panel GPO on IT, you should still be able to log into the machine as any of those users and access the control panel. If you created and linked the GPOs for some reason, you can use the GPO update force to force the GPO to be updated to that machine. So be sure to do that if you're having issues. All right, you can also log in as an IT person and then check it that way as well. I'm not going to do that. Question time. What is the name of the network share used to distribute GPOs to domain machines? Remember that was sysvol. Can a GPO be used to apply settings to users and computers? Oops. And task number 7 is authentication methods. When using Windows credentials, or sorry, when using Windows domains, all credentials are stored in the domain controllers. Whenever a user tries to authenticate to a service using domain credentials, the service will need to ask the domain controller to verify if they are correct. Two protocols can be used for network authentication in Windows domains. You get Kerberos, used by any recent version of Windows. This is the default protocol in any recent domain. You got Net NTLM, legacy authentication protocol, kept for compatibility purposes. While Net NTLM should be considered obsolete, most networks will have both protocols enabled. Let's take a deeper look at how each of these protocols work. First one up is Kerberos Authentication is the default authentication protocol for any recent version of Windows. Users who log into a service using Kerberos will be assigned tickets. Think of tickets as proof of a previous authentication. Users with tickets can present them to a service to demonstrate they have already authenticated into the network before and are therefore enabled to use it. When Kerberos is used for authentication, the following process happens. Number one, the user sends their username in a timestamp encrypted using a key derived from their password to the Key Distribution Center, KDC, a service usually installed on the domain controller in charge of creating Kerberos tickets on the network. The KDC will create and send back a ticket granting ticket TGT, which will allow the user to request additional tickets to access specific services. The need for a ticket to get more tickets may sound a bit weird, but it allows users to request service tickets without passing their credentials every time they want to connect to a service. Along with the TGT, a session key is given to the user, which they need to generate the following request. Notice the TGT is encrypted using KRB TGT account's password hash, and therefore the user can't access its contents. It is essential to know that the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as part of the contents, and the KDC has no need to store the session key as it can recover a copy by decrypting the TGT if needed. And there's a image of what they're talking about here. Number two, when a user wants to connect to a service on the network, like a shared website or database, they will use their TGT to ask the KDC for a ticket granting service, TGS. TGS are tickets that allow connections only to the specific service they were granted or created for. To request a TGS, the user will send their username and a timestamp encrypted using the session key along with the TGT and service principal name (SPN), which indicates the service and server name we intend to access. As a result, the KDC will send us a TGS along with a service session key, which we will need to authenticate to the service we want to access. The TGS is encrypted using a key derived from the service owner hash. The service owner is the user or machine account that the service runs under. The TGS contains a copy of the service session key on its encrypted contents so that the service owner can access it by decrypting the TGS. Number 3, the TGS can then be sent to the desired service to authenticate and establish a connection. The service will use its configured account's password hash to decrypt the TGS and validate the service session key. Net NTLM authentication. This works using a challenge response mechanism. The entire process is as follows. So you can see that here. All right. The client, number 1, the client sends an authentication request to the server they want to access. Number 2, the server generates a random number and sends it as a challenge to the client. Number 3, the client combines their NTLM password hash with the challenge and other known data to generate a response to the challenge and sends it back to the server for verification. 4, the server forwards the challenge and the response to the domain controller for verification. 5, the domain controller uses the challenge to recalculate the response and compares it to the original response sent by the client. If they both match, the client is authenticated, otherwise access is denied. Then the authentication result is sent back to the server. 6, the server forwards the authentication result to the client. It says note that the user's password or hash is never transmitted through the network for security. Note, the described process applies when using a domain account. If a local account is used, the server can verify the response to the challenge itself without requiring interaction interaction with the domain controller since it has the password hash stored locally on its SAM. All right, let's answer some questions here. Will a current version of Windows use NTLM as the preferred? No. Remember, that's an old protocol that uses Kerberos as the modern protocol. When referring to Kerberos, what type of ticket allows us to request further tickets known as a TGS? That was the when using net NTLM, is a user's password transmitted over the network at any point? And that would be a no. All right, task number 8, trees, forests, and trusts. So let's see what they have to say here. So far, we have discussed how to manage a single domain, the role of a domain controller, and how it joins computers, servers, and users. As companies grow, so do their networks. Having a single domain for a company is good enough to start, but in time, additional needs might push you into having more than one. Trees. Imagine, for example, that suddenly your company expands to a new country. The new country has different laws and regulations that require you to update your GPOs to comply. In addition, you now have IT people in both countries, and each IT team needs to manage the resources that correspond to each country without interfering with the other team. While you can create a complex OU structure and use delegations to achieve this, having a huge AD structure might be hard to manage and prone to human errors. Luckily for us, Active Directory supports integrating multiple domains so that you can partition your network into units that can be managed independently. If you have two domains that share the same namespace, thm.local, in our example, those domains can be joined into a tree. If our thm.local domain was split into two subdomains for UK and US branches, you could build a tree with a root domain of thm.local and two subdomains called uk.thm.local and us.thm.local, each with its AD computers and users. That's what it looks like here. Since the partition structure gives us better control over who can access what in the domain, the IT people from the UK will have their own DC that manages the UK resources only. For example, a UK user would not be able to manage US users. In that way, the domain administrators of each branch will have complete control over their respective DCs, but not over other branches' DCs. Policies can also be configured independently for each domain in the tree. A new security group needs to be introduced when talking about trees and forests. The Enterprise Admins group will grant a user administrative privileges over all of an enterprise's domains. Each domain would still have its domain admins with administrator privileges over their single domains, and the enterprise admins who can control everything else in the enterprise. Forest. The domains you manage can also be configured in different namespaces. Suppose your company continues growing and eventually acquires another company called MHT Inc. When both companies merge, you will probably have different domain trees for each company, each managed by its own department, or own IT department. The union of several trees with different namespaces into the same network is known as a forest. You can see that here. Trust relationships. Having multiple domains organized in trees and forests allows you to have a nice compartmentalized network in terms of management and resources, but at a certain point, a user at THM UK might need to access a shared file in one of MHT Asia servers. For this to happen, domains arranged in trees and forests are joined together by trust relationships. In simple terms, having a trust relationship between domains allows you to authorize a user from domain THM UK to access resources from domain MHT EU. The simplest trust relationship that can be established is a one-way trust relationship. In a one-way trust, if domain AAA trusts domain BBB, this means that a user on BBB can be authorized to access resources on AAA. That's what it looks like here. The direction of the one-way trust is contrary to that of the access direction. Two-way trust relationships can also be made to allow both domains to mutually authorize users from the other. By default, joining several domains under a tree or forest will form a two-way trust relationship. It is important to note that having a trust relationship between domains doesn't automatically grant access to all resources on other domains. Once a trust relationship is established, you have the chance to authorize users across different domains. But it's up to you what is actually authorized or not. What is a group of Windows domains that share the same namespace? And that was a tree. What should be configured between two domains for a user in domain A to access a resource in domain B? Oh, okay. A trust relationship. There we go. All right. Let's see here. Conclusion, task number 9. In this room, we have shown the basic components and concepts related to Active Directories and Windows domains. Keep in mind that this room should only serve as an introduction to the basic concepts, as there's quite a bit more to explore to implement a production-ready Active Directory environment. If you are interested in learning how to secure an Active Directory installation, be sure to check out the Active Directory hardening room to be released soon. If, on the other hand, you'd like to know how attackers can take advantage of common AD misconfigurations and other AD hacking techniques, the compromising Active Directory module is the way to go. And I'm sure we're going to get into that here soon. And that wraps up this video. Hopefully you all had a good time. Hopefully you learned something. And if you did, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all later. Have a nice day. Thank you all for watching.